Hey guys, tonight we're going to step into a space that feels a little different from the noise of the day. You know, that kind of exhaustion that no nap seems to cure. The kind that doesn't live in your muscles but deep in your chest, like carrying a backpack full of regrets you never signed up for? Yeah, that one. If you've been replaying old conversations in your head, fighting shadows of the past, or lying awake staring at the ceiling wondering why peace feels so far away, you're in the right place. And honestly, if you tried to keep dragging all that weight through life forever, you probably wouldn't survive it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. I love seeing this little map of night owls and early risers stretching across the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've been carrying things that were never yours to hold. Silent grudges, words that cut deep and never left, regrets that play like a broken record in your mind. And no matter how much you sleep, you wake up tired, not in your body, but in your soul. Tonight, this isn't just background noise to help you drift off, it's more like a mirror. A soft reflection that might finally show you why peace feels distant and how to gently invite it back home. Buddhism doesn't hand out quick fixes, it offers truth. Sometimes quiet, sometimes blunt, but always freeing. In this space together, you're going to hear teachings that can drain the poison of the past, untie the emotional knots sitting heavy in your chest, and give you the power to release. Not just in theory, but in the reality of your own life. This is for the part of you that's had enough. The part that's ready to stop suffering over things that no longer exist. To stop fighting ghosts that live only in memory. So stay close, because what you're about to hear won't just help you sleep. It might even change how you wake up tomorrow. Clinging and pain. Imagine this. A heartbreak, a betrayal, or just one cruel word said on a random Tuesday. Most people think pain is what destroys them, but pain on its own is just a passing storm. What really burns is what happens afterward, when the mind sits that pain down at the table, pours it tea and says, "Stay a while." That's clinging. That's where suffering really takes root. You've probably done it before without noticing. A friend said something hurtful, and instead of letting it float away, you replayed it in the shower. You argued with it while driving. You carried it into new relationships and wondered why they kept breaking the same way. The pain didn't destroy you, the clinging did. Buddhism uses a striking image for this. It says, holding on to pain is like grabbing a hot coal and then blaming the fire for burning you. At first, it sounds obvious. You'd never actually grab burning coals, but think of how many times you've held on to an identity built around hurt. I'm the one who was betrayed. I'm the one who can't trust. I'm the one who always gets left behind. These become jackets you wear even though they don't keep you warm. They become the way you see yourself, even though they're not who you are. And here's the paradox. Sometimes clinging feels comforting. Being the victim, being the angry one, being the heartbroken one. It gives a strange kind of stability, like at least you know who you are. The fire inside feels powerful. It says, if I let this go, it means it didn't matter. But the truth is, the fire doesn't care about justice. It just wants fuel. Every time you repeat the story, it grows roots. It takes more of your identity, until eventually, you don't just feel pain, you become pain. Now take a breath here. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Notice how your body feels when you remember an old hurt. The chest tightens, the jaw clenches, the breath shortens. That's clinging showing up physically, not just mentally. Your body remembers what your mind refuses to release. But here's the secret that changes everything. You are not your pain. You are not your stories. You are the awareness behind them. Awareness doesn't get burned. Awareness doesn't wear jackets made of hurt. Awareness just notices. And the moment you notice without judgment, there's the fire looking for more wood, you begin to starve it. Buddhist monks don't walk around telling themselves they're healed. They don't chant affirmations like a broken record. They simply observe. They watch how thoughts arise, how emotions grip, and they don't feed them. Healing doesn't come from force. It comes from seeing clearly, again and again, until the fire has nothing left to consume. Now, if you're thinking, but if I let this go, who will I be? That's normal. Releasing hurt can feel like a funeral for a part of yourself. But in that grieving, something new is born. Not because you forced healing, but because you stopped identifying with what hurt you. And here's where I'd love for you to pause with me. Drop a comment down below. What's one story, one piece of pain that you're realizing has become part of your identity? You don't have to give details. Just writing, "I see it now," is powerful enough, because once you see it, you can stop feeding it. The invitation tonight is not to kill the fire. It's to stop handing it matches. And once you do, you'll notice something fascinating. Beneath the pain, there's craving. The craving to be right, the craving to be understood, the craving to never feel that way again. And that craving is exactly where suffering begins. Which leads us straight into our next step on this journey, the way words, spoken and unspoken, can either heal those cravings or make them worse. Because long after the fire cools, the smoke of speech lingers, and that's where we're heading next. Speech and words. Think about this for a second. A wound on your skin can heal in weeks, maybe months. But words can echo for decades. A single sentence spoken in anger or whispered behind your back can linger like the smell of smoke in a room long after the fire is gone. And sometimes the words that hurt the most aren't the ones shouted at us. They're the ones repeated quietly in our own minds until they carve scars deeper than any knife. Buddhism has always been clear about this. Speech is not neutral. Every word you release carries energy. It either heals or it harms. There's no middle ground. That's why right speech is one of the Eightfold Path's core teachings. Not because monks are trying to be polite, but because words literally shape reality. They build minds, they fracture trust, they either connect us or poison us. You've probably felt it, a sarcastic remark that seemed small in the moment but stayed with you for years. A piece of gossip that spread like ink in clear water, staining everything it touched. Or maybe the harshest voice has been your own, the one that says, "I'm not enough. I always mess things up. Nobody really cares." Those scripts aren't facts. They're echoes, and echoes can become cages if you keep listening to them without awareness. The body holds on to harmful speech too. After a fight, your jaw aches, your throat feels tight, your chest pounds. That's not just stress. It's your nervous system replaying every word. Even if the argument is over, your body is still vibrating with the residue. That's why silence isn't just golden, it's medicine. Not the silence of avoidance, but the silence of awareness. The kind where you pause, breathe, and let words settle before you choose to speak. Right speech has 3 simple gates. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it helpful? If your words don't pass all 3, they're better left unsaid. And when you start practicing this, you notice something incredible. Conversations feel lighter. Relationships feel safer. You don't leave interactions replaying what you wish you hadn't said. Instead, you rest. Because truth spoken with care doesn't need fixing afterward. But here's the part that hurts most. What about the words you've already spoken? The ones you can't take back? Buddhism doesn't invite you to bury them. It asks you to see them honestly. Yes, I said that. Yes, it caused pain. That seeing is the first purification. From there, you begin to use speech differently, not out of guilt, but out of respect for its power. because every word is a tool and you get to choose if it builds or destroys. Gossip is a sneaky poison. It feels harmless, even entertaining, but every time you spread it, even passively, you plant karmic seeds of separation. You train your mind to see flaws instead of beauty, and worst of all, you invite that same judgment back toward you. What you spread, you eventually absorb. That's why the gossip that feels light-hearted in the moment becomes a weight in the long run. And what about the conversations that never end? The ones in your head? That's still speech. Internal speech is powerful. If the voice inside speaks in cruelty, doubt, or ridicule, it becomes the narrator of your life. And without realizing it, you start living inside that voice. The good news is that voice can change. It can be softened. But first, it has to be seen. Right here, I want you to pause. Take a slow breath. And if you're listening with your phone nearby, drop a comment. What's one phrase you often catch yourself repeating in your head? It doesn't have to be the whole story. Just a word or a line that feels heavy. By naming it, you start to separate from it. By sharing it, you stop carrying it alone. Silence is also part of this practice, not as avoidance, but as strength. Sometimes the most compassionate act is not to speak at all. There's a Tibetan phrase, "Speak only if it improves upon the silence." Imagine if every conversation you had followed that standard. Imagine how much lighter your world would feel, and forgiveness plays a role here too. Forgiveness is a form of right speech, even if it's never spoken out loud. It's the quiet decision to stop carrying someone else's words like a badge of who you are. Forgiveness doesn't erase what was said, but it does release your identity from it. It says, "You don't get to live rent-free in my nervous system anymore." So let this sink in. Every word you speak is an echo. Every sentence you repeat in your own mind is a seed. You can choose to scatter weeds, or you can plant peace. And every time you pause, every time you breathe before responding, you shift karma not just for others, but for yourself. Now, here's the bridge. Words leave residue. They settle like dust on the shelves of memory. And even after the shouting stops, even after the gossip fades, the memory of what was said lingers. That memory often becomes heavier than the moment itself. Which takes us into the next step of our journey, the second arrow, the way memory keeps hurting us long after the wound should have closed. Memories and the second arrow. Life will always throw the first arrow. That's the moment of pain you didn't choose. Someone leaves. A dream falls apart. A promise breaks. It lands. It stings, and no one is immune. But Buddhism says what hurts most isn't the first arrow. It's the second one, the one we shoot ourselves. The replay, the memory, the meaning we add long after the moment has passed. That arrow is sharper because we keep driving it in again and again. Think about it. A breakup happens once, but the memories of it can happen hundreds of times. Each replay in your head, each sleepless night imagining what you should have said, each flashback that shows up uninvited. That's the second arrow. And your body doesn't know the difference. It reacts like it's happening again. Heart racing, breath shallow, stomach tight. The past becomes the present, and suddenly you're suffering not from life itself, but from your own memory. That's the trap. Memory doesn't ask for permission. A smell, a song, a street corner. It barges in carrying the whole past with it. And unless you meet it with awareness, it takes over. The courtroom in your head starts another trial. The old arguments start up again. The same guilty verdict plays on repeat, and none of it is real anymore. It's just a ghost that knows your buttons. But here's the truth. Memories are not facts. They're stories. They bend, they twist, they get edited each time you recall them. A neutral moment can become betrayal. A single mistake can turn into identity. Over time, the more you replay, the more real it feels, and the more control it gains over your life. That's why Buddhist practice leans so hard on the present, not because the past didn't matter, but because the past has no power without your attention. So what do you do when the second arrow hits? You name it. You say to yourself, this is memory. This is not now. That naming creates distance. Suddenly you're not inside the story, you're watching it. And from that perspective, the arrow can't sink as deep. It becomes a wave passing through, not a storm dragging you under. Your body plays a part too. Sometimes memories live in sensation. A heaviness in the chest every year on the same date. A knot in the throat when you hear a certain name. These are physical echoes of emotional events. They're not random, but even here, awareness works. You can say, here is sadness, here is grief. When the body is acknowledged, it relaxes. When ignored, it tightens. That soft acknowledgement is often the very thing the memory has been waiting for. Let's try it right now. Take a slow breath. As you exhale, ask yourself, where in your body are you holding a memory? Maybe it's your chest, maybe your jaw. Just notice. Don't fix, don't fight, just notice. That's the beginning of release. And if you're comfortable, share in the comments. What part of your body carries your past the most? You'll be surprised how many people feel the same. Another practice is grounding. When memory pulls you into the past, bring yourself back to the senses. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel under your fingertips right now? The body can only exist in the present. It's your anchor when the mind wanders. That's why meditation, even something as simple as naming sensations, breaks the cycle of replay. Sometimes we cling to memories because they feel unfinished. We keep waiting for closure, for justice, for the apology that never comes. But here's the radical truth. Peace doesn't depend on resolution. It depends on release. You don't need to finish the story. You just need to stop telling it. That doesn't mean forgetting. It means refusing to bleed for what's already over. It means letting the memory be a teacher, not a prison, a lesson, not a loop. And every time you catch yourself in the replay, you have a choice. Put down the arrow or keep stabbing. So here's the invitation. The next time an old conversation shows up in your head, notice it. Smile gently, even if it hurts. Say to yourself, this is memory. This is not now. And then come back to your breath. The more you do this, the more the spell of memory weakens. One day the arrow lands and simply falls to the ground. And once that arrow loses its grip, something incredible happens. You start to discover space. Not the empty kind, but a clearing. A silence where you don't have to replay, where you don't have to prove, where you don't have to argue with ghosts. And that silence is powerful. It's not avoidance, it's medicine. But silence has its own challenge. Because when you stop reacting, when you stop replaying, the world might still poke you. People may still push buttons. And that's where the next teaching comes alive. The quiet strength of stillness, the art of non-reaction. That's where we're heading next. Stillness and non-reaction. The world trains you to react. Someone cuts you off in traffic, and your chest heats up before you even realize it. A text comes through with the wrong tone, and suddenly your heart is racing. Even a memory shows up uninvited, and your whole body responds like the danger is happening right now. That constant cycle of reaction is exhausting, and most of the time it doesn't protect you, it just drains you. Buddhism teaches something radical here. Stillness is not weakness. Non-reaction is not apathy. In fact, they're some of the most powerful responses you can choose, because when you don't react, you break the chain. You interrupt karma in motion. You stop pouring fuel on a fire that was already starting to die out. Think about how many regrets in your life were born from reacting too fast. The words you wish you hadn't said, the email you wish you hadn't sent, the argument that could have ended in silence but instead ended in scars. All of it was reaction, not clarity. Stillness doesn't erase emotion, it just gives you a chance to let the first wave pass before you decide if it deserves your energy. Here's what's wild. The body doesn't know the difference between real danger and emotional noise until stillness intervenes. Without stillness, every raised eyebrow, every delay, every sharp word sets off the alarm system. Cortisol spikes, muscles tense. Your nervous system lives in fight or flight like it's being chased every day. But when you pause, when you breathe, when you wait before acting, the body learns something new. It learns safety. It learns peace. Try it right now. Inhale slowly through your nose. Hold for just a moment. Exhale out through your mouth. Notice how even that tiny pause changes the rhythm of your whole system. Your shoulders drop. Your jaw loosens. That's what non-reaction feels like. It's not shutting down. It's waking up. I want to invite you into something simple but powerful. The next time you feel that urge to respond immediately, pause. Just 3 seconds. And if you're willing, tell me in the comments how it went. Did the pause change your words? Did it change your body? These small stories matter, because every pause is proof that the old patterns can shift. Stillness also sharpens your perception. When you stop reacting, you start observing. You hear the emotion beneath someone's words. You notice the tension in a room. You sense the fear behind someone's anger. That awareness is wisdom. It lets you move through life with precision instead of defense. You're no longer guessing, you're seeing. Of course, the ego doesn't like this. The ego whispers, if you don't react, you'll lose. If you don't defend yourself, they'll think they're right. But that's just pride dressed up as protection. Non-reaction isn't about letting others win. It's about choosing not to play a game that costs your peace. It takes practice. You won't get it perfect every time. Some days you'll still snap, still argue, still feel the heat rise before the pause arrives. That's okay. The practice is not about perfection. It's about returning. Every time you remember to pause, every time you take a breath instead of biting back, you're rewiring. You're teaching your nervous system a new way to exist. And here's the freedom. When you stop reacting, people lose their power to control you. They can push buttons, but if you don't respond, the button breaks. You become unshakable, not because nothing touches you, but because nothing defines you. This is the quiet strength that monks carry. It's not that they never feel anger, sadness, or fear. It's that they let those emotions rise without letting them rule. They watch the storm without becoming it, and when the storm passes, and it always does, they're still there, clear, steady, unmoved. So let this land tonight. Every pause you take is medicine. Every silence you choose is a seed of peace. Every breath you use instead of a reaction is a moment you reclaim for yourself. Non-reaction doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough to protect your energy. And as you feel that idea settling in, as you imagine what it would be like to carry this calm into your daily life, another layer begins to appear. Because even when we practice stillness, even when we pause, there's something underneath that keeps pulling us back into noise. The need to protect an image, the hunger to defend who we think we are. And that's where the next step on this journey takes us. The illusion of the ego and identity. The ego is a clever actor. It puts on costumes, steps into roles, and convinces you that the part it plays is who you really are. You might think of yourself as the betrayed one, the angry one, the hard-working one, the one who always has to keep it together. Those labels feel solid, but Buddhism reminds us they're just smoke. Thoughts, moods, and preferences passing through. The problem is that the ego insists they're permanent. It whispers, "This is me. This is who I am." And once you believe it, every criticism becomes an attack. Every mistake becomes shame. Every disagreement becomes a war. The truth is, The ego was never built to be your enemy. It started as a survival strategy. Childhood shaped it through praise and punishment. Society molded it with labels, job titles, and social roles. Over time, it learned to cling to anything that gave you a sense of stability. But the same walls that once kept you safe eventually became a prison. Because ego doesn't just protect, it demands. It wants recognition, control, and validation, and it never gets enough. Have you ever noticed how exhausting it is to defend an image? You rehearse what to say before walking into a room. You edit yourself in conversations so you sound impressive. You measure your worth by how others see you. That's the ego at work, performing non-stop. And it drains you, because deep down you know it's not the real you. Let's pause for a breath here. Inhale deeply. Hold. Exhale slowly. Ask yourself quietly, what role have you been defending most lately? The strong one? The victim? The one who's always right? If you feel brave, share it in the comments. Just a word or two. You'll be surprised at how freeing it feels to name the mask you've been wearing. Buddhism teaches anatta, not self. It means there is no fixed, unchanging self. Only processes. Only passing states. You are not the mask. You are the awareness watching the mask. When you realize that, you stop needing to defend every thought or feeling. Being wrong doesn't make you worthless. Being unseen doesn't mean you're invisible. You can simply be without armor, without performance. And here's something powerful. The ego often disguises itself in suffering. It says, look how much I've endured. Look how misunderstood I am. That proves I'm special. Pain becomes a badge of honor. But what looks like depth is often just another trap. Because as long as the ego keeps identifying with hurt, it will never allow you to heal. Healing would mean letting go of the story that defines it. Judgment is another favorite disguise. The ego compares constantly better than this person, worse than that one. Even when it's directed at yourself, it keeps the game alive. You're never good enough, never fast enough, never perfect enough. That's not truth speaking. That's ego keeping itself busy by tearing you down. But the moment you see it clearly, the spell breaks. Meditation isn't just about calming the mind. It's about perspective. You sit and you watch. There it is again, the voice that wants to prove, protect, perform. You name it gently. Ego. And just like a phantom exposed to light, it begins to fade. Not because you fought it, but because you saw through it. And what's left when ego dissolves? Space. Spaciousness in your chest. Spaciousness in your breath. Spaciousness in your relationships. Suddenly, you don't need to be impressive. You don't need to win the argument. You don't need to carry the weight of old identities. You can simply rest in the awareness that was always there. It doesn't mean you stop having a personality. You'll still laugh, still cry, still have preferences, but those experiences no longer define you. They move through you instead of sticking to you. Offense becomes indifference. Shame softens into gentleness. Drama turns into silence. Even grief changes shape. The ego says, you lost something you needed. Awareness says, you were blessed to love it all. And when you show up like that, something beautiful happens in your relationships. Real connection begins, not the kind based on performance or approval, but the kind based on presence. Vulnerability, the willingness to not know, the willingness to just be. That's when love deepens, not the romantic kind, but the human kind. The one that doesn't need an audience to feel real. So let this be the reminder tonight. You are not your story. You are not your scars. You are not the masks you've been defending. You are the sky, not the clouds. And when you stop identifying with the clouds, they can come and go without dragging you with them. Now pause again. Inhale deeply. Exhale slowly. Let your shoulders drop. Feel what it's like to not defend anything. Just for this moment, there's nothing to prove, nothing to protect, just breath, just awareness, just you. But the ego doesn't let go easily. Even when you've seen through it, there's another shadow waiting. It hides behind fairness, behind justice, behind the craving for someone else to make things right. And that craving, if left unchecked, becomes one of the hardest illusions to release. Which takes us directly into our next step, the hunger for justice and the freedom of forgiveness. Justice and forgiveness. There's a part of the human heart that aches not just from pain itself, but from the idea that someone still owes you. Maybe it was the partner who left without explanation. Maybe it was the friend who betrayed your trust. Maybe it was the parent who never gave the words you needed to hear. The story forms quickly. They took something from me, and until they make it right, I can't move on. It feels fair, it feels logical, but Buddhism calls this a trap, because every day you wait for their repayment, you're the one paying interest on their debt. Think about how many nights you've stayed awake replaying what they did. How many conversations you've rehearsed in your head, just waiting for the moment they finally apologize. How much of your energy has been tied up in hoping they'll feel the same pain they caused you. That is the weight of emotional debt, and carrying it doesn't punish them, it punishes you. Forgiveness in Buddhism doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. It doesn't mean saying it was okay. It means you stop demanding payment for a debt that may never be repaid. You release the contract. You choose your peace over their apology. You say, they owe me nothing now. Not because they gave enough, but because you deserve to stop bleeding from the same wound. Let's pause here. Place a hand on your chest for a moment. Take a slow inhale. Exhale gently. And ask yourself, who comes to mind when I think of debt? Whose name or face makes my body tighten? If you're open, write just their initials in the comments. Not to expose them, but to release them. Just that small act can be the first thread you cut in a rope that's been tying you down. Here's the hard truth. Sometimes the people who hurt you will never realize what they did. Sometimes they move on untouched. Sometimes they never lose a wink of sleep. And yet, you're still carrying them in your nervous system. The mind insists it's not fair. They should pay. But clinging to that idea keeps you stuck in the very moment you want to leave behind. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It doesn't let injustice win. It simply ends the cycle of self-punishment, because their karma is theirs, and yours is yours. Life will teach them what it needs to in its own time. It's not your job to wait around holding your breath until it happens. And what about when the one you feel owes you is yourself? Maybe you carry regret. Maybe you keep punishing yourself for what you should have known, what you should have done differently. That too is emotional debt, and it can be forgiven. You can say to yourself, I did the best I could with what I knew then. You can say, I choose to love myself instead of punish myself. Imagine how your life would feel if you released that weight, even just a little. There's another layer here, one that hides beneath the surface. Sometimes the craving for justice is really the ego in disguise. It says, they don't deserve peace if I haven't received it. It dresses revenge up as fairness, but revenge never heals. It binds you to the very person you want freedom from. Every time you imagine their downfall, your nervous system relives the pain. You're not punishing them, you're reliving the punishment yourself. So, what does real freedom look like? It looks like walking away without dragging their story with you. It looks like releasing the invisible contract and saying, my life does not depend on your remorse. That's not weakness, that's strength. Because it takes more courage to let go than it does to keep demanding. And here's where I want to remind you, forgiveness is not a gift to them, it's a gift to you. It says, I refuse to give you any more of my peace. I refuse to let you live inside my nervous system for another day. That's not denial, that's sovereignty. So tonight, maybe whisper it to yourself. They owe me nothing now. Try saying it aloud. Feel how your body responds. Notice if your chest loosens, if your breath deepens. That's the feeling of release. And when you start living this way, something shifts. The weight of old debts begins to lift. The energy you once spent keeping score becomes available for joy, for creativity, for rest. Forgiveness is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of a new one. But here's the twist. Once you start to forgive, once you lay down the ledger and step into peace, another energy often rises up quickly. It doesn't sound like fairness anymore. It doesn't sound like justice. It sounds like fire. Anger. That burning, restless energy that insists it still needs to be expressed. And that's exactly where we're going next, into the hidden armor of anger and the softer truths it's been guarding all along. Anger and transformation. Anger is loud, isn't it? It crashes into the room. It fills your chest with heat, and it makes your voice sharper than you meant it to be. On the surface, it feels powerful, like a shield, like energy you didn't have a moment before. But if you stay long enough with anger, if you sit with it instead of throwing it, you start to see what's hiding underneath. And almost always, it isn't strength. It's pain. It's grief. It's fear. Most people never stay long enough to notice that. They feel the surge, they lash out, they hit send on the text, they slam the door, and for a short time, they feel relief. But once the adrenaline fades, they're left with the same old ache, only heavier now, weighed down by regret and guilt. That's because anger is rarely the true message. It's the mask. Beneath every outburst is something softer, something more vulnerable. Disappointment, helplessness, the sting of not being seen or understood. Buddhism doesn't deny anger. It treats it like a visitor. A messenger that shows up saying, "Something here hurts." The practice isn't to silence it or pretend you don't feel it. The practice is to listen, to pause long enough to hear what it's protecting, because anger almost always stands guard in front of something the heart doesn't feel safe enough to admit. So, let's pause together. Inhale slowly. Hold it. Exhale gently. And as you breathe, ask yourself, what does my anger usually protect? Is it sadness? Is it fear? Is it the feeling of not being enough? If you feel safe, share it in the comments. Just one word. Naming it out loud can feel like cracking the armor open just enough for air to come through. Anger also has a way of fooling us. It convinces us that we're in control when really we're being controlled. You think you're directing it, but in truth, it's driving you. How many times have you said something in anger only to wish you hadn't? How many bridges has that fire burned? Anger offers quick power, but it never builds lasting peace. Here's another trap. Anger isn't always explosive. Sometimes it's quiet. It shows up in sarcasm, in the cold shoulder, in the way you roll your eyes or shut down a conversation. It simmers, it hides. And while it may feel safer than yelling, it still corrodes. It still eats away at connection. It still keeps the heart heavy. So, what's the way forward? First, awareness. Notice anger without fusing with it. Instead of saying, "I am angry," you say, "Anger is here." That one shift makes all the difference. Suddenly, you're the observer, not the storm. The storm can rage, but you're the sky that holds it, and the sky doesn't get torn apart. Second, give it space. When you feel the surge, don't rush to react. Breathe, walk, sit. Let the body tremble if it needs to. Let the heat move through you. Emotions are energy. Energy needs movement. If you trap it or deny it, it stagnates. But if you allow it, it flows and eventually softens. In Buddhist practice, loving-kindness meditation is often used here. You begin with yourself. May I be safe. May I be at peace. Then, if you can, you extend it outward, even to the person who triggered the anger. not because you approve of what they did, but because hatred only binds you tighter. Sometimes you can't get to love right away. That's okay. Start with neutrality. Start with silence. Even that is progress. Anger turned inward is just as corrosive. Self-hatred, shame, the belief that you should have done better. Those flames burn quietly, but they're just as destructive. They need the same attention, the same compassion, the same pause. You are not wrong for feeling. You are simply human. And here's something to remember. Strength doesn't mean suppressing anger. Strength means choosing what to do with it. Sometimes strength is speaking calmly instead of shouting. Sometimes it's walking away without needing to prove anything. Sometimes it's saying nothing at all. True strength is quiet. It doesn't need volume to be powerful. So the next time anger rises, try this. Stop. Name it. Feel where it lives in your body. Breathe into that place. Ask softly, what are you really protecting? Don't force an answer. Let it come when it's ready. And notice how, just by listening, the fire starts to lose its fuel. Because anger isn't the enemy. It's a signal. And when you treat it that way, when you hear the message without mistaking it for your identity, anger transforms. It softens into the grief or fear it was hiding. And once you see that, once you sit with the truth beneath the fire, healing finally has a chance to begin. And as the flames cool, another realization begins to surface. Emotions don't disappear just because you understand them. They live in the body. They leave traces in your chest, in your belly, in your nervous system. Unless they're digested, they stay, which is why our next step is so important. Learning how to truly process emotions, the way the body digests food. Without that digestion, you're not just carrying anger, you're carrying everything, and that weight only grows heavier. That's where we're headed next. Emotional digestion. Think about your body for a moment. When you eat a meal, your stomach doesn't just hold it forever. It breaks it down. It takes in what nourishes and releases what doesn't. If the process stops, if the food just sits there, you get sick. Emotions work the exact same way. They come in, they need to be felt, processed, digested. But most of us never learned how. Instead, we swallow anger, grief, disappointment, and let them sit undigested for years. No wonder our hearts feel heavy. No wonder our bodies feel tense. Buddhism often compares the mind to a garden. Seeds of emotions get planted, and whether they grow into flowers or weeds depends on how you tend them. If you ignore a seed, it doesn't vanish. It sprouts underground, twisting into your roots. That's what happens with emotions we don't digest. They show up later as sudden outbursts, unexplained anxiety, or even physical illness. The pain has to go somewhere. You've probably felt this. A small trigger sets you off in a way that feels bigger than the moment. Someone says something minor, and suddenly you're overwhelmed. That's not about the present. It's yesterday's undigested grief rising to the surface. The body and mind are always looking for release. So how do we begin to digest emotions? The first step is presence. Sit with the feeling without rushing to fix it. Just as the stomach works slowly, the heart does too. You don't need instant clarity. You don't need to analyze. You just need to stay. Here is sadness. Here is anger. Here is fear. By naming it gently, you give the body permission to process. The second step is allowing expression in safe ways. That might mean crying, moving, breathing deeply, even writing. Tears are not weakness. They're the body's way of flushing what the mind can't carry. Movement shifts the energy that gets stuck. Silence lets the nervous system reset. The goal isn't to get rid of emotions, but to let them pass through fully so they don't get stored. Take a pause right now. Inhale deeply. Hold it. Exhale slowly. Notice if something rises, an old ache, a memory, a tightness in your chest. Don't fight it. Don't analyze it. Just notice. If you feel safe, share in the comments what your body is holding tonight. Even one word, grief, anger, shame, can be the start of release. There's a teaching in mindfulness that emotions are like visitors. Some arrive loudly, banging on the door. Others slip in quietly and sit in the corner. But none of them live with you forever. They come to pass through. The trouble begins when you either slam the door in their face or cling to them, refusing to let them leave. Digestion means opening the door, letting them sit at the table, and allowing them to go when they're ready. And here's the freedom. Once emotions are digested, they stop controlling you. You no longer overreact to small things because you're not carrying old storms inside. Your body feels lighter. Your sleep deepens. Your relationships soften. Just as a well-fed body has energy, a well-digested emotional life has peace. But digestion doesn't mean indulgence. It doesn't mean feeding the emotion endlessly. If you replay the story again and again, you're not digesting, you're marinating. And marinating keeps you stuck. True digestion means feeling fully without drowning, observing without being consumed. It's a balance, and practice teaches you where the line is. Sometimes the hardest emotions to digest are the ones we feel guilty for having. Anger at someone we're supposed to love. Resentment toward people who gave us their best. Grief we think we should have gotten over by now. But digestion requires honesty. You can't heal what you refuse to taste. You can't release what you won't admit exists. So tonight, maybe give yourself permission. Whatever you're holding, let it be real. Let it move through. Breathe with it. Cry if you need to. Write it out. Walk it out. Don't rush it. Don't shame it. Let your body do what it knows how to do. Digest. And as you rest into this process, you might notice something. Emotions, when digested, leave behind wisdom. Just as food leaves nutrients, pain leaves lessons. You begin to see what matters, what doesn't, what boundaries you need, what values guide you. The emotion passes, but the truth remains. That's how the heart grows strong without becoming hard. Now feel this, the body, lighter after release. The mind, calmer after truth. And notice how that state opens the door to another deep teaching. Because once you start digesting emotions, you realize every reaction, every feeling, every storm leaves behind a ripple. And those ripples don't just affect you, they affect the world around you. Which brings us to the next part of our journey, the law of cause and effect. Karma, and how every reaction we choose writes the story of what comes next. Karma and reaction. Every action is a seed. Every word, every thought, every reaction, it all plants something. Karma isn't some cosmic scoreboard waiting to punish or reward you. It's cause and effect, simple and immediate. When you smile at someone, the seed is connection, and it often blooms right away. When you lash out in anger, the seed is conflict, and the fruit usually comes sooner than you'd like. The field of your life is filled with whatever seeds you've been planting, whether you noticed or not. The trouble is, most of us plant unconsciously. We react without thinking. Someone snaps at us, so we snap back. Someone cuts us down, so we return the insult. In those moments, we're not choosing seeds, we're just scattering weeds, and then later we wonder why our lives feel overgrown with negativity. Karma isn't fate, it's gardening. What you sow, you live in. Think about the last time you lost your temper. It probably didn't end with peace. Even if you won the argument, what grew afterward? Distance, silence, regret. That's karma in action, not mystical, just practical, and the same is true in the other direction. The last time you chose patience, what grew? Maybe the moment softened, maybe the other person relaxed, maybe you walked away lighter. That's karma too. Seeds, cause, effect. Here's where stillness connects with karma. When you pause before reacting, you're choosing what to plant. You're saying, I will not throw weeds into this soil. That choice alone changes everything, because karma is not just about what you've done before. It's about what you do right now. The present moment is always planting. Let's try something together. Think back to a recent conflict, a fight, a tense conversation, even a quiet resentment you never voiced. Ask yourself, what seed did I plant there? Was it patience? Was it blame? Was it compassion? If you're comfortable, write a single word in the comments. Just one seed you know you planted recently. By naming it, you're taking ownership of the garden you're tending. Buddhism reminds us that karma isn't punishment, it's education. Life keeps teaching you with the fruits of your seeds. If you keep planting bitterness, you'll keep living in bitterness. If you plant kindness, you'll eventually live in kindness. Sometimes the lesson takes time to bloom, but the soil never forgets. The beautiful part is this: you're never stuck with yesterday's garden. Even if you've planted weeds for years, you can start sowing something new today. Every breath is a chance to plant again. Every pause, every kind word, every act of letting go is a fresh seed. Over time, the weeds thin, the flowers spread, and your life starts to look different. Not because fate changed, but because you did. There's a story of a monk who was insulted daily by a neighbor. Instead of reacting, the monk greeted the man kindly each morning. Years later, when the neighbor fell ill, the monk was the only one he trusted. That's karma. Not magic, but consequence. Patience planted a seed, and compassion bloomed when it was most needed. And it works in smaller ways too. Think of how your body feels after reacting with anger: tight, restless, drained. That's immediate karma. Now think of how your body feels after responding with calm, looser, lighter, steady. That too is immediate karma. The garden grows not just outside you, but inside you. So tonight, let this sink in. You don't control what seeds others plant, but you always control your own. You decide whether to add fuel to a fire or water to a flower. And that choice writes your future moment by moment. And as you sit with that, you might notice something else. Sometimes the seeds we plant feel good at first. They feel like warmth, like passion, like fire. But not every fire sustains. Some flames burn bright but leave you empty. Some joys are false fuel sparks that trick you into thinking you're alive while quietly draining you. Which leads us into our next step: the difference between false fire and true light, and how to tell when your energy is feeding you or only consuming you. False fire. There are moments when your whole body lights up with energy. Maybe it's anger that makes your heart pound, or the rush of gossip when you feel like you've just uncovered something juicy, or even the temporary thrill of proving someone wrong. In those moments, it feels alive, like fuel surging through your veins. But here's the catch: that fire doesn't last. It burns hot, it burns fast, and it leaves you emptier than before. That's false fire. False fire is seductive because it mimics vitality. It makes you believe you've tapped into strength, when really you're running on fumes. Think about the last time you vented in anger. For a few minutes, it felt powerful, but after, your body was drained, your chest was tight, and your mind replayed the moment with regret. That wasn't strength. It was energy stolen from your peace. Buddhism warns about these fires because they trick us. They're fueled by craving, by clinging, by the need to feel something when we're uncomfortable with stillness. And the more we feed them, the hungrier they get. You might know this cycle. Anger leads to guilt. Guilt leads to self-criticism. Self-criticism sparks more frustration, and the fire keeps burning. It doesn't illuminate, it consumes. But there's another kind of fire, a steady flame that doesn't scorch. The warmth of compassion, the spark of truth, the quiet glow of mindfulness. These fires don't drain you, they sustain you. They don't leave you exhausted. They leave you clear, steady, alive in a way that doesn't collapse afterward. That's the difference between false fire and true light. Pause here for a moment. Take a deep breath. Inhale slowly. Exhale gently. Think of a time when you felt a rush of energy that ended in regret. Can you name it? If you're willing, share a word in the comments. Anger, revenge, gossip. Just one word. Naming it is like holding up a lantern to see what kind of fire it really was. The tricky part is that false fire often disguises itself as passion. Standing up for yourself, speaking your truth, fighting for justice, these can all be noble. But the question is, what's fueling it? If it's fueled by resentment, it will leave ashes. If it's fueled by clarity and compassion, it will build something lasting. The fire itself isn't the problem. The source of the flame is. False fire also shows up in distraction. That late-night scrolling that keeps you awake, the endless debates online, the urge to buy something just to feel better for a moment. Each one gives you a spark, a little jolt of energy. But afterward, you're left emptier, more restless, more disconnected. That's how you know it was false fire. It didn't nourish you, it drained you. The good news is, you don't have to extinguish all fire. You just have to learn to tell the difference. One way is by checking how you feel afterward. True fire leaves calm in its wake. False fire leaves exhaustion. True fire builds connection. False fire breeds isolation. True fire feels steady. False fire feels frantic. And here's the invitation. The next time you feel that surge, pause. Ask yourself, will this fire sustain me, or will it consume me? You'll know by the way your body responds. If your chest feels tight, if your breath shortens, if your mind races, it's probably false fire. If your breath deepens, if your shoulders relax, if your heart feels open, it's true. Once you start making this distinction, life changes. You stop chasing sparks and start tending steady flames. You stop looking for quick rushes of energy and start building sources of strength that actually last. The nights feel quieter. The mornings feel lighter. And you realize you don't need the fireworks when a steady candle can light your whole room. And here's where the journey deepens. Because even after you see through the false fires, there's another pattern most of us carry without realizing. We collect emotions like souvenirs. We hold on to pain, anger, even joy, as if they're objects we can store on a shelf. But emotions were never meant to be hoarded. They were meant to move. Which brings us to the next step, emotional hoarding, and the art of learning to finally let go. Emotional hoarding. If you've ever walked into a cluttered room, you know the feeling, stuff piled on every surface, closets overflowing, drawers that barely close. It feels heavy, suffocating, even if you can't name why. Now imagine that same kind of clutter, not in your house, but in your chest. Old grudges, forgotten heartbreaks, silent disappointments, all stacked up like boxes you never opened. That's emotional hoarding. And most of us are guilty of it. We hold on to emotions like they're artifacts. A breakup happens, and years later, you still keep the memory like a souvenir. A cruel comment from middle school echoes in your mind like it was yesterday. Even victories we cling to, moments of pride we replay again and again, afraid to let them fade. Just like physical hoarding, emotional hoarding makes us feel safe. We think, if I keep this, I won't forget. If I hold on, I'll be prepared. If I remember, I'll never get hurt like that again. But the cost is weight. The cost is a life so crowded with old emotions that there's no space for new ones. Think about it. Have you ever felt joy, but couldn't fully embrace it because you were still carrying sorrow? Or tried to trust but found the walls of old betrayal in the way? That's the clutter talking. Emotions that should have passed through you are now blocking the doorway to your present. Buddhism teaches impermanence anicca. Everything passes. Every emotion, every thought, every storm. But hoarding ignores that truth. It treats emotions like possessions, as if keeping them will give us control. Instead, it traps us. We end up living in a museum of old feelings, curating exhibits of pain, anger, regret. And the more we hoard, the less room there is for peace. Pause with me here. Take a slow breath. Inhale deeply, hold, and exhale gently. Ask yourself, what's one emotion you've been storing for too long? Maybe it's resentment, maybe it's shame, maybe it's even nostalgia. If you feel safe, share just one word in the comments. Saying it aloud is like taking the first box out of the room. It creates space. The body knows when you're hoarding. Tight shoulders, shallow breathing, restless sleep. Your nervous system is trying to manage emotions that should have moved on years ago. It's like trying to carry luggage for a trip you already finished. No wonder you feel tired. No wonder rest never feels enough. So how do we stop hoarding? The first step is awareness. Notice when you're holding on to an emotion past its time. Ask, is this helping me, or is it just taking up space? The second step is permission. Let yourself feel the emotion fully, so it can move through instead of being stored away. Cry, laugh, grieve, whatever the body asks for. And the third step is release. That might mean journaling, meditating, or simply breathing with the intention, I don't need this anymore. Release doesn't mean forgetting, just like cleaning out a house doesn't erase the memories. Letting go of emotions doesn't erase the past. It just gives you room to live in the present. And the more space you clear, the more peace has somewhere to land. The irony is that emotional hoarding often comes from fear. Fear that if we let go, we'll lose part of who we are. But identity built on old pain is not identity. It's a cage. You are not your storage. You are not your boxes. You are the space that holds them. And space is always free to be cleared. So tonight, imagine this. Each exhale is you carrying a box out of that cluttered room. Each inhale is fresh air filling the space. With every breath, your inner home becomes lighter, cleaner, freer. That's what release feels like, not emptiness, but possibility. And as you settle into that image, as you feel the relief of clearing out what you no longer need, another truth begins to appear. Even when we let go of emotions, sometimes we still find ourselves arguing with shadows, having conversations with people who aren't even there, reliving conflicts that never resolve. These are ghost conversations, and they haunt more than we realize. That's where our journey goes next. Ghost conversations. You've had them before, haven't you? Arguments in your head that never actually happened. A fight with someone who isn't even in the room. A defense you rehearse in the shower, a comeback you whisper while driving alone. These are ghost conversations. They feel real because your body reacts as if the other person were standing right in front of you. Your heart races, your breath shortens, your jaw tightens. But it's all happening inside. The ghosts are made of memory, imagination, and unresolved emotions. Ghost conversations usually start with unfinished business. Maybe someone said something cruel and walked away. Maybe they never admitted what they did. Maybe you never got to say what you needed. So the mind steps in to finish it. But the trouble is, the conversation never ends. The ghost always has more to say. You walk away exhausted, but the argument keeps following you. Buddhism points out something important here. These conversations are just thoughts. They're not truth. They're not happening. They're not required. But the mind clings because it wants control. It thinks, if I rehearse this enough, I'll be ready. If I replay this enough, I'll finally win. In reality, no one wins. The ghosts grow stronger, and your peace grows weaker. Pause here for a moment. Take a breath. Inhale deeply. Exhale slowly. Notice if there's a ghost conversation haunting you tonight, a voice you can't stop hearing, a debate you never finish. If you feel safe, write just the initials of that ghost in the comments. Not to shame them, but to name them. Sometimes naming is enough to weaken their grip. Your nervous system doesn't know the difference between a real fight and an imagined one. That's why your body feels drained after a ghost conversation. It thinks you've just been in conflict. Your cortisol spikes, your muscles ache, your sleep suffers. The battle never happened, but the wounds are real. That's the cost of fighting shadows. So how do you quiet the ghosts? The first step is recognition. The moment you catch yourself in a ghost conversation, say gently, "This is imagination. This is not happening now." That one sentence pulls you out of the trance. The second step is breath. Anchor yourself back in the body, where only the present exists. And the third step is redirection. Instead of giving the ghost your energy, you choose silence. You choose stillness. You choose not to feed the script anymore. It helps to remember this. The closure you're looking for in those arguments doesn't come from winning them. It comes from letting them go. The ghost doesn't need to agree with you. The ghost doesn't even need to listen. You can give yourself the closure. You can say, "I don't need this conversation anymore." That choice is where your freedom begins. Some people fear that letting go means losing power, as if silence means surrender. But in truth, silence is strength. When you no longer argue with ghosts, you reclaim the energy you've been wasting. That energy can be used to create, to love, to rest. And you'll notice how much lighter your days feel once you stop carrying invisible arguments in your head. Now try this with me. The next time a ghost conversation starts, pause. Don't fight it. Just watch it like a movie. See the words appear, hear the voices echo, but don't respond. Let the scene play and fade without joining in. You'll notice something powerful. The ghost needs your participation. Without you, it disappears. Ghost conversations show us how much power the mind has to create suffering, but they also show us how much freedom we have to end it. By choosing silence, by choosing awareness, you cut the strings, and once you've seen that, it's hard to go back to arguing with shadows. And as the ghosts begin to fade, another layer of truth reveals itself. Sometimes the conversations aren't the only things we carry. We also absorb the moods, the energy, the heaviness of others around us. Their storms become ours. Their darkness settles in our chest. Which leads us to the next step, energetic contamination, and how to protect your peace when the world around you is loud with pain. Energetic contamination. You know the feeling. You walk into a room and it's heavy, even though no one has said a word, or you spend time with someone who's anxious, and when you leave, your chest feels tight too. Human beings don't just exchange words. We exchange energy. We catch moods like we catch colds. This is what I call energetic contamination. It isn't mystical. It's the nervous system syncing with the people around you. And unless you're aware of it, you'll start carrying emotions that were never yours in the first place. Think about the last time you hung out with someone who complained non-stop. You probably walked away feeling drained, even if your own day had been fine before. Or maybe you've spent time around anger. You weren't mad at first, but after enough exposure, you found yourself on edge, snapping at small things. That's energy transfer. It sneaks in, and without boundaries, it settles inside you. Buddhism reminds us that awareness is protection. The moment you notice, this tension I feel isn't mine, you loosen its grip. The trouble comes when you fuse with it, believing that every emotion you carry is your own. Suddenly, you're weighed down by storms that never belong to you. Pause with me here. Inhale slowly. Exhale gently. Ask yourself, who in your life tends to leave their energy on your shoulders? Is it a co-worker, a family member, a friend? If you feel comfortable, drop a word or even just an initial in the comments. Sometimes naming the source is enough to remind yourself it doesn't belong to you. Protecting your energy doesn't mean cutting people out of your life completely. It means knowing where you end and they begin. It's learning to sit with someone's pain without making it your identity. Compassion says, I feel with you. But contamination says, I'll carry this for you. And the second path only leads to exhaustion. One simple practice is visualization. Before you enter a difficult space, imagine a clear boundary around your body, like a soft light or a gentle shield. It's not a wall to block people out. It's a filter. It lets love and connection through, but it keeps out the heaviness that doesn't serve you. This isn't fantasy. It's training your nervous system to remember, not every feeling in the room has to become mine. Another practice is cleansing. Just as you wash your hands after touching something dirty, you can release energy after a heavy encounter. Step outside. Breathe deeply. Shake out your arms. Take a walk. Let the body know the moment is over. Without release, you keep reliving it long after the other person is gone. And here's the paradox. Sometimes energetic contamination happens because we want to help. We think carrying someone's pain is compassion, but true compassion doesn't mean drowning with them. It means offering a steady hand from the shore. You can listen without absorbing. You can love without losing yourself. The more you protect your energy, the more you can give from a place of fullness instead of depletion. Imagine the difference between pouring from a full cup and pouring from an empty one. When you carry everyone's weight, you end up with nothing left. But when you protect your boundaries, you actually have more to offer because your peace remains intact. So the next time you feel weighed down for no clear reason, pause and ask, is this mine? If the answer is no, breathe it out. Let it go back where it came from. You don't have to keep what was never yours. And as you settle into that freedom, another truth becomes clear. Even when we release the energy of others, there's still a critic inside, an inner voice harsher than any outside influence. It's the voice that says you should be better, faster, stronger, always more. And that critic, if left unchecked, becomes the heaviest burden of all. Which brings us to our next step, the inner critic and the trap of should, the inner critic and should. There's a voice in your head that never seems to rest. It doesn't yell like anger. It doesn't sting like betrayal. It whispers constantly like a background hum. You should be better. You should be stronger. You should be further along than this. That voice is the inner critic, and left unchecked, it becomes the loudest ghost you'll ever live with. The critic doesn't just comment, it commands. You should have answered differently. You should have worked harder. You should have been over this by now. Each should piles onto your chest like invisible weight. The tragedy is that the critic often sounds like you. It borrows your voice, your memories, your values. But it isn't truth. It's conditioning. It's every old expectation, every cultural standard, every unresolved judgment stitched together into a soundtrack that never stops playing. Think back to today. How many times did you say should to yourself without even noticing? I should eat better. I should call more people back. I should stop feeling this way. On the surface, it sounds like motivation, but underneath, it's shame. Because should never celebrates progress. It only highlights what's missing. Pause with me here. Inhale slowly. Exhale gently. Now ask yourself, what's the loudest should you've been carrying lately? Write it in the comments if you feel comfortable. You'll notice that naming it takes away some of its power because the critic thrives in silence. Once it's seen, it starts to lose control. Buddhism teaches compassion not just for others, but for ourselves. The Buddha never said, you should. He said, notice. Notice your breath. Notice your thoughts. Notice your suffering. And in noticing, soften. Compassion doesn't demand improvement. It invites invites presence. It says, "You are here." And here is enough for this moment. The inner critic, however, lives in comparison. It measures you against an imaginary version of yourself, the perfect self, the flawless self, the one who never stumbles, but that self doesn't exist. It never did. And yet, the critic insists you should measure up. No wonder you feel tired. No wonder peace feels distant. So, how do we quiet the critic? First, by catching it. The next time you hear should, pause. Ask, whose voice is this? Is it mine, or is it a parent, a teacher, a culture that told me I wasn't enough? Often you'll realize the critic isn't even your belief. It's an echo. And echoes lose strength once you recognize them. Second, replace should with could. Instead of "I should meditate every day," say "I could meditate today." Instead of "I should be stronger," say "I could try something small." Should creates pressure. Could creates possibility. That tiny shift changes the energy from shame to choice. Third, practice kindness in your inner language. Talk to yourself the way you'd talk to a friend. You wouldn't tell your friend, "You should be over this by now." You'd say, "I know it's hard. I'm proud of you for holding on." Why not offer yourself the same compassion? And here's the irony. When you drop should, growth becomes easier. You move forward not out of shame, but out of care. You meditate because it feels good, not because you're failing without it. You exercise because it brings energy, not because you hate your body. You forgive yourself because peace feels lighter, not because shame told you to. The critic loses its grip when you stop believing every word it says. You can notice it, smile gently and say, "Thanks for your opinion, but I choose kindness." Over time, that choice becomes natural. The voice grows softer, the pressure lightens, the silence inside expands. And in that silence, something else appears. Because beneath the critic, there's often another presence. Not the scolding voice, but the watching one, the part of you that always observes, that never stops analyzing, that feels like an inner audience. And that spectator shapes your life more than you realize. Which takes us to our next step, the inner spectator, and how to live free from the constant feeling of being watched, even by yourself. The inner spectator. Have you ever noticed that even when you're alone, you're not really alone? There's a part of you watching. It comments on how you look, how you sound, whether you're doing enough. It's like you're performing on a stage, even if the only audience is in your own head. That's the inner spectator. And it might be one of the most exhausting roles you've been playing without even knowing it. The spectator doesn't scream like anger, and it doesn't whisper like the critic. It just observes, constantly. You post a photo and immediately imagine how others see it. You speak in a meeting and replay your tone in your head. You laugh in public and instantly wonder if it was too loud. It's that constant self-surveillance, the invisible camera you think is always on you. And the cost is freedom. Buddhism teaches that suffering comes from attachment, and the inner spectator is attachment in disguise. It clings to image, to perception, to reputation. It says, "If I can control how I'm seen, I'll be safe." But safe from what? Safe from judgment? Judgment will come anyway. Safe from rejection? Rejection is part of life. The truth is, the spectator doesn't keep you safe, it keeps you small. Pause with me here. Take a slow breath in. Hold. Exhale gently. Ask yourself, when do you feel most watched, even when no one's around? Is it at work, in social media, with family? If you feel comfortable, drop one word in the comments. Just naming it reminds you that you're not the only one carrying this invisible audience. The spectator builds its power from early experiences. Maybe you grew up being told to behave a certain way, to smile, to be polite, to never upset anyone. Maybe you were praised for performing well, so you learned that being seen a certain way earned love. Those lessons became internalized, and now, even without the crowd, the spectator is still in the front row, waiting for you to perform. But here's the thing. You were never born to be watched. You were born to live. Children don't care how they're seen. They run, they sing, they dance in the kitchen without an audience. It's only later that the spectator moves in, editing, reviewing, controlling. Freedom begins the moment you stop performing for the invisible crowd. So how do you quiet the spectator? First, by noticing when it shows up. The next time you catch yourself rehearsing a conversation in your head, pause. Say gently, "That's the spectator." By naming it, you separate from it. Second, shift your attention back to the senses. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel? The body only knows the present. The spectator only exists in imagination. By grounding yourself, you leave the stage and return to life. Third, experiment with imperfection. Post a photo without editing it. Say something honest without rehearsing. Wear something comfortable instead of impressive. Notice how the world doesn't collapse. Notice how people still connect. Each small rebellion weakens the grip of the spectator. And finally, remember this. No one is watching as much as you think. Everyone else is too busy worrying about their own inner spectator to focus on yours. When you realize that, you free yourself from the performance. You remember that life isn't meant to be a stage, it's meant to be lived. Let's pause again. Inhale deeply. Exhale slowly. Imagine the spotlight fading, the curtain closing, the audience vanishing. It's just you now. Not the watched version, not the performing version, just you. And that version has always been enough. When you begin to live without the constant gaze of the inner spectator, you create room for something new. Instead of being trapped in how you look, you can finally explore how you feel. Instead of controlling perception, you can experience reality. And in that reality, you find the raw material of transformation. The ability to take the energy of suffering and turn it into something lighter, freer, even beautiful. Which leads us straight into the next step, acceptance and transmutation, the alchemy of the heart. Acceptance and transmutation. Pain comes to everyone. No one escapes it, but what makes the difference is what you do with it. Some people fight it, trying to push it away. Others bury it, pretending it never happened. And many cling to it, replaying the story until the pain becomes their identity. But Buddhism offers another path: acceptance. Not acceptance as in giving up, but acceptance as the doorway to transmutation, the process of turning suffering into wisdom. Think of it like heat and clay. On its own, clay is soft, shapeless. Heat by itself is destructive. But together, they make pottery strong, useful, even beautiful. Pain alone can destroy, but when met with acceptance, it becomes the fire that shapes you into something stronger. Acceptance doesn't mean liking what happened. It doesn't mean approving of the loss, the betrayal, the injustice. It means seeing reality as it is, without adding more resistance. Because resistance is where suffering multiplies. You've probably felt this before. The breakup hurt, but what hurt more was telling yourself, this shouldn't have happened. I can't live without them. The job loss stung, but what crushed you was, this means I'm worthless. Acceptance drops the second arrow. It says, this is what is. And in that space, healing can begin. Pause with me here. Inhale deeply. Exhale slowly. Ask yourself, what truth have I been resisting most? Maybe it's the end of a relationship. Maybe it's your own limitations. Maybe it's something you can't change about the past. If you feel safe, share one word in the comments. Just naming it begins the process of transmutation. So, what does transmutation look like? It's not about replacing pain with joy instantly. It's about allowing pain to teach. Grief shows you what mattered most. Anger shows you where your boundaries are. Fear shows you what you value enough to protect. Each emotion, when accepted, carries a lesson. Without acceptance, you only feel the burn. With acceptance, you find the message in the fire. This is why meditation is so powerful. When you sit in silence, pain doesn't vanish, but you stop running from it. You notice where it lives in the body, the chest, the belly, the throat. You breathe with it, and slowly, the pain changes shape. It softens. It opens. Sometimes it even reveals wisdom that words can't explain. That's transmutation. The same energy that once harmed you becomes the energy that frees you. But here's the hard part. The mind resists. It says, if I accept this, it means I lost. If I accept this, it means it's okay. But acceptance isn't approval, it's clarity. It's saying, this happened, and I can choose how to carry it. That choice is where freedom lives. There's a story of a monk carrying a heavy bag of sand. He walked for miles, complaining about the weight. Finally, another monk asked, "Why don't you set it down?" The first monk said, "Because it's mine." That's what resistance looks like, clinging to the weight because it feels personal. Acceptance is setting it down. Transmutation is realizing the bag was never who you were. And once you've felt that shift, you begin to see suffering differently. It no longer feels like an enemy. It feels like a teacher. Not a teacher you wanted, but one who leaves behind lessons you couldn't have learned any other way. That doesn't make the pain good, but it does make it meaningful. So tonight, instead of asking, "Why me?" try asking, "What now?" instead of, "Why did this happen?" Ask, "What can I learn?" Those small shifts turn the fire into light. And over time, you'll notice that the very thing that once broke you has become the reason you're stronger, kinder, more awake. And as you let that sink in, another truth begins to surface. Even when pain teaches, even when you grow from it, there's still one toxin that lingers more stubbornly than almost any other. It doesn't scream like anger. It doesn't sting like grief. It seeps quietly day after day, corroding your peace from the inside. That toxin is resentment. And that's where our journey leads next. Resentment. Resentment is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to fall. It feels justified, even righteous. They wronged you. They never apologized. They don't deserve your forgiveness. So you carry the weight as if it were a shield. But resentment doesn't protect you. It corrodes you. It takes up space in your chest, clouds your thoughts, and turns every reminder of that person or moment into another chance to suffer. It usually starts small. A comment that stung, a betrayal that never healed, a debt that was never repaid. At first, you tell yourself you'll move on, but then the story returns. Uninvited, whispering, "They shouldn't have gotten away with that." Each time you replay it, resentment grows roots. Before long, you're not just remembering the hurt, you're living inside it. Buddhism teaches that resentment is one of the heaviest chains we carry, not because the pain wasn't real, but because the attachment keeps us bound to it. You may think holding resentment keeps you safe from being hurt again. In reality, it keeps you hurt endlessly, long after the original wound. Pause with me here. Inhale deeply, exhale slowly. Ask yourself, who or what am I still resenting? Is it a person, a place, maybe even yourself? If you feel safe, write a single word or initial in the comments. Naming resentment doesn't mean you excuse it. It means you acknowledge the chain so you can begin to unlock it. The mind loves resentment because it feels like control. It gives you a sense of moral high ground, like you're holding a silent protest inside your own heart. But look closer. Who's actually suffering? Not the person you resent. They may not even think about you. The suffering is yours. Resentment is self-imposed imprisonment, and the key is already in your pocket. So how do you begin to let it go? The first step is recognition. Don't deny it. Say honestly, yes, I am resentful. The second step is compassion. Not for the one who hurt you, but for yourself. Compassion that says, I don't deserve to keep drinking this poison. And the third step is release. Sometimes that looks like forgiveness. Sometimes it looks like simply deciding to stop feeding the story. Either way, release is freedom. This doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean the hurt was acceptable. It means you refuse to keep carrying it. Resentment is heavy. Forgiveness is light. When you choose forgiveness, you're not letting them off the hook. You're letting yourself out of the cage. And what about resentment toward yourself? That's often the deepest cut. Blaming yourself for what you didn't know, punishing yourself for mistakes long past. That resentment eats away silently, but the same truth applies. You can choose to release it. You can choose to say, I did the best I could with what I knew then. I don't deserve to keep suffering for old mistakes. Imagine resentment as a stone you've been carrying in your pocket for years. Heavy, rough, dragging on your every step. Tonight, picture setting it down. Feel your body without it. Feel your breath deepen. That's the relief of letting go. And here's the paradox. Once you drop resentment, you don't lose strength. You gain it, because now your energy isn't tied up in bitterness. It's free for love, for creativity, for presence. Resentment was never protecting you, it was draining you. So let tonight be the beginning. Maybe not a full release yet, but the first loosening of the grip. Whisper softly, I don't need to carry this anymore. Notice how even saying that shifts something inside. And as you rest in that lighter space, another challenge begins to reveal itself. Resentment may fade, but the mind has a way of echoing the past, replaying pain in cycles even after we think we've moved on. Those echoes can keep us trapped in loops that feel endless. Which leads us to our next step, the emotional echo chamber, and how to finally step outside of it. Emotional echo chambers. Have you ever noticed how the mind loves to repeat itself? A hurt happens once, but the replay happens 1,000 times. Like shouting into a canyon, the sound bounces back over and over until it feels louder than the original voice. That's what an emotional echo chamber is. It's not just the pain of what happened, it's the constant reverberation of it inside your head. You know this experience. You lie awake at night, replaying the same argument. You revisit the same breakup, the same mistake, the same failure, until it feels bigger with each pass. The mind says, if I keep thinking about it, maybe I'll figure it out. But instead, you only get more tangled. The echo grows, and peace feels further away. Buddhism calls this papancha mental proliferation. It means the mind multiplies stories far beyond the original event. A simple comment becomes an insult. An insult becomes a narrative. A narrative becomes an identity. Suddenly, the echo chamber is no longer about what happened. It's about who you believe you are because of it. Pause with me now. Inhale slowly. Exhale gently. Ask yourself, what echo has been the loudest in your life lately? Is it regret? Is it anger? Is it shame? If you feel safe, share one word in the comments. Just naming the echo helps you hear it for what it is. An old sound bouncing around, not the present moment. The danger of echo chambers is that they distort reality. A single painful moment starts to feel like the whole truth of your life. You begin to mistake the repetition for evidence. If I've thought it this many times, it must be true. But repetition doesn't make truth. It only makes noise. So how do we step out of the chamber? The first step is awareness. Notice when you're in a loop. You might say to yourself, "This is the echo." Even that simple recognition creates space between you and the thought. The second step is grounding. Bring your attention back to the senses, your breath, the weight of your body, the sound in the room. Echoes only survive in the mind. They can't live in the present. And the third step is redirection. Instead of replaying the same story, choose a different focus. Not to suppress, but to remind yourself there's more to life than this sound. Meditation is powerful here. When you sit quietly, you'll hear the echoes. They'll rise, they'll repeat, but instead of following them, you let them pass. Over time, the echoes lose volume. The canyon grows quieter, the silence returns. There's also a practice of inquiry. When an echo arises, ask, "Is this happening now?" Often, the answer is no. The event is over. The person is gone. The story belongs to the past. By questioning it, you weaken the illusion that it's still real. The irony is that echoes can also point toward healing. They show you where the wound still lives. If the same story keeps returning, it means that part of you is asking for attention. Not more replay, but more compassion. Sometimes the way out of the echo chamber is to sit with the original pain, feel it fully, and let it move through. Then the echoes no longer have fuel. So tonight, imagine your mind as a canyon. The echoes are bouncing back and forth. Each time you chase them, they grow louder. But when you sit quietly, the sound fades. You don't need to fight it. You only need to stop shouting back. And here's the invitation. The next time you hear the echo, instead of reacting, breathe and smile gently. Say, "That's just the echo. It's not me. It's not now." You'll be surprised how quickly the volume drops when you refuse to add your own voice. But even as the echoes quiet, another challenge arises. Because hidden inside every repeated story is a signal, a small thread of truth buried in the noise. And if you can learn to separate that signal from the endless echo, you discover the lesson you are meant to carry forward, which takes us into the next step. Extracting the signal, the art of finding wisdom in the noise without getting lost inside it. Extracting the signal. Not every echo is meaningless. Hidden inside the noise, there's often a signal, a lesson, a truth, something your heart is trying to hand you. The problem is that most of us never separate the two. We get lost in the repetition, in the endless what-ifs and if-onlys, instead of pausing long enough to ask, what's the message here? Think of it like static on a radio. The crackle is loud, distracting, even overwhelming. But if you tune carefully, beneath the static there's a song playing. That song is the signal. In your life, the static is the looping story. The signal is the lesson inside it. Maybe the echo of a broken relationship keeps coming back. The static says, "I wasn't enough. I'll always be abandoned." But the signal might be, "I value honesty. I need trust." The echo of a past failure might scream, "I'm not capable. I'll never succeed." But the signal is, "I want to live with purpose. I want to align with my strengths." The echo is noise. The signal is wisdom. Buddhism teaches that clinging to the echo keeps us trapped in suffering, but listening for the signal transforms the pain into guidance. Every wound can become a teacher if you stop listening to the noise and start hearing the message. Pause here. Inhale deeply. Exhale slowly. Ask yourself, what echo in my life has been the loudest lately? And if I lean in, what's the signal beneath it? If you feel safe, share just a few words in the comments, noise and signal. By writing it, you practice separating them, and that's how clarity begins. The process of extracting the signal is not about denying the pain, it's about refining it. Just as gold is refined from ore, wisdom is refined from suffering. The ore is heavy, dirty, raw. But when you sift carefully, you find something valuable hidden inside. The key is discernment. Discernment means asking, does this thought drain me, or does it guide me? Does it lead me back into loops, or does it point me forward? If it drains, it's static. If it guides, it's signal. The more you practice this, the easier it gets to distinguish the two. Another practice is journaling. Write down the repeated thought exactly as it shows up. Then ask yourself, what value is buried inside this thought? What boundary, what need, what truth is it pointing toward? Often you'll realize the signal was simple, but it was buried under layers of noise. And here's the beauty. Once you hear the signal, the echo doesn't need to repeat anymore. The mind repeats because it feels unfinished, unresolved. When you take the lesson, you close the loop. The canyon quiets. The song plays clearly. Imagine if every pain in your past had a signal waiting inside it. Instead of carrying it like dead weight, you could carry it like wisdom. The betrayal shows you the value of trust. The failure shows you the strength of persistence. The grief shows you the depth of your capacity to love. That's the alchemy of extracting the signal-turning noise into meaning. And the more you practice, the lighter you become. Because you no longer need to hoard the static. You no longer need to replay the echoes. You can take what's useful and let the rest go. That's what freedom feels like, not empty, but refined. So tonight, maybe whisper to yourself, I will listen for the signal, not the noise. Let that be your mantra as you breathe. Notice how even saying it makes your body soften, your mind clear. And as you sit with that clarity, another truth emerges. Extracting the signal is powerful, but it's only the beginning. Because once you know the lesson, you still have to act on it. Sometimes that means stepping out of old rooms, old relationships, old environments that no longer serve you. Which leads us to the next step, the soft exit, the art of leaving what no longer nourishes your soul. Soft exit. Leaving doesn't always have to look dramatic. It doesn't need slammed doors, burning bridges, or long speeches about why you've had enough. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away quietly, with no explanation, no fanfare, a soft exit. It's the art of stepping out of what no longer feeds your peace, gently, gracefully, without needing anyone else's permission. We live in a culture that glorifies the hard exit, quitting in a blaze of anger, confrontations that go viral, announcements that make it clear you're done. But Buddhism teaches a quieter truth. Liberation doesn't require noise. The lotus doesn't leave the mud with explosions. It simply rises, silently, toward the light. That's the soft exit. Think about the rooms you keep entering out of habit. Maybe it's a friendship that drains you, a job that no longer fits, a family dynamic that always leaves you raw. You walk in, you sit down, you play your role, and afterward, you wonder why you feel so tired. The signal is clear. You don't belong in that room anymore. But leaving feels complicated, scary, maybe even disloyal. So you stay, hoping it will change. Meanwhile, your soul is whispering, it's time to go. Pause here. Inhale deeply. Exhale slowly. Ask yourself, where in my life am I still sitting in rooms that make me smaller? If you feel safe, share one word in the comments. Not the whole story, just a word. Naming it can be the first step in walking toward the door. A soft exit doesn't mean cutting people off cold. It doesn't mean disappearing without care. It means stepping back with clarity, reducing your presence without drama, choosing your peace without hostility. It's an act of love, not always for the other person, but for yourself. The reason soft exits are so powerful is that they break cycles quietly. When you argue, when you explode, you're still hooked. The other person still has strings attached to your energy, but when you exit softly, the hook is gone. You don't need to prove, defend, or win. You simply remove yourself. And in that absence, healing begins. Sometimes the hardest soft exit is internal, leaving behind old identities, old versions of yourself without needing to declare, "I'm not that person anymore." You just stop feeding those patterns. You stop rehearsing the old stories. You let the past version of you dissolve quietly, without ceremony. That's as much a soft exit as walking away from a toxic room. Here's a practice. When you feel trapped in a cycle, ask yourself, what if I just stopped showing up here? It could be a mental loop, a one-sided relationship, a role you've been performing. Imagine what your life would feel like without it. Imagine how much lighter you'd be if you didn't keep entering rooms where you no longer belong. That's the beginning of the exit. And the beautiful part? Most of the time, no one notices as much as you think. The world keeps moving. The room adjusts. The silence fills itself. The fear of leaving is often louder than the leaving itself. What remains is space. Space for you to breathe, to rest, to grow. So tonight, picture a door. Behind it, the noise of old cycles. In front of it, the calm of what's next. Imagine yourself walking out, softly, without slamming the door, without looking back. Just stepping into the quiet. That's the soft exit. And as you feel that door close behind you, you'll notice something else. Once you've left the wrong rooms, you begin to see which ones are truly yours. But you'll also discover that leaving doesn't just happen outside. Sometimes the heaviest exits are from within. The letting go of resentment that has poisoned your inner world. Which brings us to our next step. The antidote to resentment and the gentle art of cleansing the poison before it spreads further. Closing reflections. You've walked with me through a long night's journey across the landscapes of pain and memory, through the hidden traps of anger, resentment, and ego, and into the softer fields of stillness, forgiveness, and release. Each story has been less about answers and more about invitations, an invitation to pause, to breathe, to remember that you are not your wounds, not your roles, not the echoes of your past. You are the awareness that notices, the space that holds everything, and the silence that outlasts every storm. As you listen now, let your body grow heavier against the bed. Let your breath lengthen. Imagine the noise of the day dissolving like mist under the morning sun. Each inhale brings in calm. Each exhale carries away what you no longer need. Nothing to prove, nothing to protect, nothing to carry. Just this moment, simple and free. And maybe you can feel it already, that lighter presence, that sense of being safe enough to rest. Safe enough to trust that you don't have to keep all the stories alive in order to exist. Safe enough to remember that you can let go and still remain whole. I want to thank you for staying with me through this journey tonight. If something in these stories touched you, I'd love for you to share your reflections in the comments. Sometimes even one word is enough. Your thoughts might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And if you'd like to keep walking these paths together, subscribe to the channel and gently tap the notification bell so you'll know when the next story arrives. For now, though, there's nothing more to do. Let the room be quiet. Let your thoughts drift like clouds. Let your body surrender to rest. You've carried enough. Tonight, you can finally set it down. And when you wake, may you feel lighter. May you carry only what nourishes you. May you step into tomorrow with the calm you've cultivated here. Now, close your eyes fully. Let the last threads of awareness dissolve. The night will hold you, the silence will guide you, and sleep, soft, deep, and healing, will arrive in its own time. End of script. Sweet dreams.